Black Cat Lounge is sponsored by Beacon, a home for those who have a passion for filmmaking and the unusual. The Haunted Hinsdale House. Those who walk there do not walk alone. Paraware, apparel for the action-seeking paranormal investigator. Dragonfly art and soul for all of your magical, metaphysical, and spiritual needs. Mystery Control, your go-to feed for science, magic, true crime, the paranormal, and so much more. Niagara, one of the top rated destinations in Western New York. The Black Cat Lounge is part of the Paraflix Entertainment Network. Hey everybody, Tim Shaw here. Thank you so much for being a part of the show tonight. Where else would you be on a Tuesday night? It's, I don't know where you guys are, but here in the Western New York area, it got a little dicey because Saturday was warm. It was beautiful. Sunday, we got snow. Typical Western New York weather. But it's all going to go and the sun's going to shine and it's going to get warmer and we're all going to be able to get out and get into our adventures. Tonight, I got to tell everybody that I am so excited to have this guest on tonight. I mean, I really am, because it has a lot to do with some of my own interests. You guys know that along with the paranormal stuff and the spiritual stuff and all that other stuff, I am so interested in the Victorian age and Victorian mourning practices and rituals and items left behind. And you guys know I have a small collection of it, and that I love to go and I love to share whenever I get a chance to speak on the subject. So tonight, I cannot wait for this. This is going to be, I'm excited for this show. So anyway, our guest tonight is an avid collector of the weird, the bizarre, and the unusual, which, you know what? Again, one-on-one, I got to say that I think I could have coffee with this guy. And, he himself has a passion for the Victorian mourning era. I mean, everything that goes on with it. He's an author. He's a speaker. He's penned Morbid Curiosity, Skulls, and Killer Collection. I cannot wait. And I'm going to tell you what, we're going to talk about today, his book, Beyond the Veil, The Victorian Obsession with Death and Mourning. Look at this. What a job his publisher did on this book. Look at this beautiful black binding. This is gorgeous. And I'm going to tell everybody right now that I have read this book cover to cover. I highly recommend it. And if you are interested in this topic, this is your go-to book. We'll talk about it because it is just such a great book. I can't say enough about it. So anyway, let's bring on our guest, the one and only Paul Gambino. Paul, how are you, my friend?
I hope I could live up to that introduction. That was very, very kind of you.
Well, you know what? I mean, I get a chance to I get a chance to interview some pretty cool people. I mean, I've had, Dacker Stoker on here, the great grand nephew of Bram Stoker, who runs the estate, and he's a writer and everything. And the one thing that I am always in awe of is the fact that someone of like your caliber, who has written something so wonderful, and same with him, take the time out of your busy schedules, man, to just to say hi and come on my show and talk about something that we both love.
Well, that's exactly what you say. The key word there is something you both love. So it doesn't seem like it's a chore. It doesn't seem like, you know what I mean? It's just an extension, really, of what you want to do, Writing is one aspect of it. Talking about it is another, and you know, it's also um, less stressful to have these kind of conversations,
It
especially with
is.
someone who knows. You know
You
what I
know,
mean.
it
So
it is, and everybody knows that. You know, yours truly just loves, and as you can see everything behind me, loves the age and is fascinated by totally fascinated by. So I want to ask you. I mean, okay, well, first I'm going to ask you about all the oddities, like and curiosities and stuff. How did you get involved with that first?
well, I grew up, I've told this, I grew up with my grandparents in a very old house. So that had to be what it was. And, you know, the house was very old. It was in the house. It was in the family for generations. Um, my grandmother was, not a hoarder, but she kept a lot of things, and we had tons
Hmm.
of drawers and tons of trunks, and I would go through them. So that might have been the collecting end or the wanting to keep stuff, but and I guess what the oddities end of it was, and it might have been just from this one specific piece, and that is, as a child, it didn't phase me in the least, and that was we had in my room in a reliquary a completely life-size Saint Sebastian from the turn of the century,
Yeah.
arrows hanging from the tree, and it was in my bedroom. My friends would come over and they'd be like, you know, completely freaked out. And and I guess as I got older into my older teenagers, I thought, oh, this is kind of cool. Look what I have. But as a 10, 12, 11, you know, I was like, oh no, that's all it was. So I wasn't even like trying to be cool that I had this thing in my room, you know. So that whole thing, um, because that was one of the earlier things I started collecting. If you want to talk about oddities and
Hmm.
vintage or antique, mostly Catholicism, you know, old, you know,
Right.
religious artifacts. So, and that spawned into postmortem. Um, and then I had to scale the postmortem down because you know how it is with collecting. You know, you're very broad, and then you're like, okay, I can't just, you know. And then it
Yes.
became, I felt the most, I have an affinity, maybe unfortunately, for sadness or the sadder side of life, and I, you know, the most, you know, was postmortem Victorian era children's
Right.
postmortems, you know, and so that's how that became about in my own personal collections, and then meeting other collectors and um oh, that's jumping ahead. That's how the books came about, but that's how my personal collecting thing, and then then funaria, a lot of stuff revolving around death and macabre. And
Right.
my wife feels that, and there's probably a lot of validity to it, that I have some kind of fear of death. I did live in a house with my grandparents, so that kind of thing was always there, and
Right.
and it feels like that if you can surround yourself with these manifestations of death, there's some kind of control thing going on. Oh, I can control, you know, the fear because I'm surrounding myself with this stuff. That's probably a
You
pseudo
know,
intellectual, but
well, no, it's funny because a lot of times I knew a guy who's passed on now, Jonathan Lento, and he was a paranormal guy, and he was fearful of clowns.
mhm.
He had that phobia. So what did he do? He went and he would buy every clown that he could possibly find and just surround himself in every room with clowns and of different
Yeah,
makes and types. And it never he never was like cured of being afraid of clowns, but it desensitized him. And I think that
yeah,
a lot of times I know myself uh getting to that golden age that I'm getting to
yeah, me
pretty
too.
rapidly, uh being able to see what was left behind is really like a solace where it's like uh it's amazing, and you can almost feel the love and respect that these people held on to. And and I think you probably feel the same way I do. It's almost as if we're like we have got to be curators
Absolutely.
of this stuff that's left over, and that's left to us. Because how many times do you think I gotta here's a question I'll ask you, because you're one of those guys like me. you're walking through a antique store, you're walking through a garage sale, and you see an old, let's say, funeral card, or you see an old photograph, and you stop and you look at it and you think to yourself, I can't believe there's nobody left that wants this.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know?
Yeah, no, it's definitely, you're definitely the caretaker of these pieces. It's, and like I say, that why I chose children is because that's the most heartbreaking. You know what I mean? So like,
Yes.
I'll hold on to these. I'll cherish these. You know what I mean? I look at them. You know how we do. We pull stuff out and we look, and not to be melodramatic or anything, but you in some sense you mourning for these children. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Still to this day, you're like I really feel a pain that you had to pass away at such an early age. You know what I mean? So it does keep that. It keeps that alive. No, for lack of a better term, not
It does,
alive.
and I firmly believe that if you can keep that memory alive, just one more generation.
Yeah, it's true too.
You know what? You've done your job. You've done your job. Well, let's get back. Let's get to this book, Beyond the Veil: The Victorian Obsession with Death and Mourning. Look at this great book. It's just beautiful. Victorian age. What attracted you to specifically the Victorian age? Because I mean, if we start looking at things, we have like the pre-Victorian age, which was the whole idea of the good death, where the person died at home, surrounded by family. That whole scenario. And then you have, after the Victorian age, the post-Victorian age, where you have the breakup of the nuclear families and the fear of global annihilation and that. What was it of that age? What is it that attracts you to it?
Well, I think it was in terms of it as a personal not personal connection, but a personal admiration or a fascination with it that was there. In terms of it being a book, and I wanted to write a book on mourning, and if I think about it, there's two time periods that really kind of first come to mind. Not that these are the only, but the first two that kind of come to mind is, you would figure, well, ancient Egypt. Obviously, they were, death was a thing.
Right.
That's not really my thing. That wasn't my thing. For most people, the next thing is, okay, the Victorian era. You know what I mean? And that was much closer to me, and something that I felt here. So that was, how came about to choose or go in that direction. One thing I will say that was interesting. Did that answer your question?
That answered the question perfectly.
Okay. About research on the book, I assume you'll eventually would ask me that, so I'll jump ahead. And if I'm jumping ahead and you want to,
go ahead, please.
Okay. And most people ask when post writing a book and you're in an author interview, they'll say, "Oh, what most surprised you, or about writing the book?" And in this book, there really was something that surprised me. And it didn't happen at the beginning. It happened through the research. And I set out writing a book on post-mortem, on Victorian mourning and death and the obsession with. And the more research I did to do it, the more the book became about how the Victorians lived and how hard it was to live. Hence, why the death was so. I mean, of course, we know Victoria, Queen Victoria, with the death of her husband and everything, and how that put past, since being so high profile, the pall was, hung over England, Western Europe, and the States. But, that was just one aspect of it. I mean, obviously, we all know, antibiotics didn't come about till after Victoria had already died, and the germ theory wasn't in effect. The working conditions were so bad. There was, you had the Ripper and many other people. So death was all around in their life. So you know, it surprised me how much time and effort, and not effort in a bad sense. It was enjoyable research, but it was more how they lived. And unfortunately, so much of what I researched about how they lived ultimately led to premature death. Of course, everything we do ultimately is going to rely, and not only a premature death, but for so many, because of excuse me, because of poor medical training or knowledge,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
death was many times um, a lot more difficult and painful and horrific than it could have been, even if they were just left alone. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, you realize that there had that, and this is, a theory not solely to me, but the Victorians had two choices: um, turn a blind eye to it, fear it, or try to make peace with it, that it's inevitable and
Mm-hmm.
we'll have these mourning practices, and um, and that'll help us deal with something that's just such a big part of our life. So that was an interesting thing that I discovered when researching the book. I thought, oh, I know about Victorian mourning. I'm just going to start,
Yep.
listing it all and expanding on it. And if you read, so much of the book, which you have, like I literature, painting, music, everything was fortunately or unfortunately, affected. And then the whole embracing of, the embracing of TB as, a muse, for artists, that,
Right.
that I don't think there's been too many. I guess possibly you could say heroin addiction has been at one time, or maybe even presently, unfortunately, embraced as a way for art. Many artists think that, through
Exactly.
opium.
The altered state of consciousness
Yeah,
is sometimes what creates the art.
right.
We have that we saw that through the 1960s and going into the 70s.
Yeah.
That was very, very well. Let's put it to, let's even go back even further. I had a friend that just passed away this year that was a beatnik artist
Hmm.
back in the day, just before the Korean War, and it was all part of that. I mean, and it's things, speed back in that time period. I mean, the Kerouac period. I mean,
Right.
that was common, and it created art, and it created art. And if we start looking at the Victorians, I often wonder, because opium was just so widespread at that time, that how much of the influence that the drug culture at that time had on the artistic, the entire into artistic adventures and all the different styles that they actually used. And the more that you start reading about it, and again, in your book, you cover the art of the Victorian age, of the mourning, amazingly concise, especially when you start going into the erotic art and the erotica of that time period, and you're able to go and wrap it all up into something that is so understandable, and it really makes sense. And I'll be honest with you, when it came to art, yes, I did know a lot, a bit about it, but it never really opened my eyes, and it never really made sense to me. It's just, to me back then, it was just like art. After reading your book, now I'm looking at these Victorian artists with a more critical eye to see what they want to show and all the minute details. And that's something that I never really looked at. So kudos for that. I would never in a million years have been brought that out into a book, because that's something that I never really discovered. Now, let me ask you this about what was the fascination with Queen Victoria? Now, I mean, basically, this is a novice softball question, but I in this day and age, we think to ourselves, well, somebody, you know, somebody like that across the sea, you know, who cares? You know, we're doing this over here in the United States. Why were like the upper middle class and upper class of our country so enamored with Victoria?
When you're saying the States?
Yes.
Yeah. I think because I mean there was still despite wanting to break away, there was still a sense that royalty, even if it was tyrannical,
Right.
there was like you said, the upper class, still felt that to emulate that was for it was something to be admired. So Victoria's influence on the Western world and stuff was still there. This, despite what may have been going on in the States,
Mm-hmm.
and then on a more basic level, a lot of it had a considerable amount had to do with fashion. I mean, so obviously there wasn't TV and there wasn't that, but there were illustrations and newspapers came across and stuff like that. So Victoria turned that whole mourning and a lot of the aristocracy and a lot of the very rich of England turned the mourning practice into something very visual, and not to be sexist, but in the women's end, with their fashion, so
Right.
it became it became fashionable here to replicate or emulate or to be in the there was a haute couture of mourning fashion, know what
Right.
I mean?
Right.
So that that kind of, and that even that shallowness, for lack of a better word, was even after a while, after a certain period in England, came to fruition there too. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they were more concerned about what they looked like, and actually, there are certain things, and it's mentioned, where men started to find women, and I don't know if it's because they assumed that they were. It probably, some of it had to assume that they were widows, but
Right.
they became attractive. Even though they were covered from head to toe, it became attractive. It was attractive clothing, even though it was
Right.
thing. So, yeah, we all know England still had a lot of influence over the States early
Mm-hmm.
on. So,
Oh, definitely. And I mean, a lot of it was, if you start looking at it between the antebellum period going in through
yeah,
the American Civil War period and then past it, at the end of the American Civil War, it still had such a hold,
yeah,
on the United States. I mean, Lord Palmerston and all his doings when it came to the political intrigues. Consider, with the Confederates, dealing with the Confederacy, dealing with the states, having their India, all of their
yeah,
conquest in India and in Asia. So I mean, it had so many implications, and they're reaching the reaches of the British Empire at that time was immense. Now, in the book we and you talked about clothing, widow weeds.
yeah.
It's amazing because I did a little bit of a deep dive a while ago on it, and I could not believe. I thought for the most part it was either a homespun industry or B, specific tailoring for your upper class, which it was up to that point. But I started coming across article or advertisement after advertisement after advertisement for clothing.
There were
Was
departments. There were departments in department stores.
That's
Morning,
amazing.
yeah, morning clothes.
See, that's amazing to me because I mean, we, as someone who grew up in the formative years in the 60s and 70s,
Mm-hmm.
I basically remember as a Roman Catholic having going to Sattlers here in Buffalo, New York, for communion clothing.
Sure,
Now,
yeah.
now they really don't even have that, but you could buy your stuff at certain places. I
Yeah.
think that was an offshoot of a lot of that time period. Now, what fascinated me was the fact that the period of mourning, the period of time, you had to go X amount of months before you could go and like have a white collar. Or what if this is
Well,
going to be okay, this is a difficult question. I've not found like the origins of a lot of that, why they did that, why they had that time of mourning, that specific time of mourning where the widow would have to go and kind of follow the rules, and was that like something that would have been like, because I know like in there's certain traditions in the Jewish faith on death, and there's certain traditions in other faiths. But is this something that just kind of developed on its own, or do you think that this is something that perhaps had an origin someplace that we can actually pinpoint?
I don't know, and that's a
That's a
really
hard
good
question.
question of who determined, 18 months for a husband, or you know what I mean, and when you can go from black to purple to a lighter color,
Right.
and why. Um, you know, you know, the sim
Here's another good question that just came up in the chat room. Did men
Yes,
wear mourning clothes as well, or was it
yeah.
just for women?
No, men did, but as you can imagine, it's a man's world. A man's mourning period was, well, even if is a man's mourning period was very short, even for his wife, and he was expected to go back to work in 3 days.
Right.
So, but he didn't have to mourn or wear mourning clothes for a fraction of the time. But there was, and you've seen it, he wore black. Um, Basically, it was the black. There wasn't really veils. I mean, you do see in certain things, but that was more like when the top hat had, maybe a covering over the face, but
Mm-hmm.
that wasn't really the standard. And even when I almost got like hoodwinked in some of the research, because there's a lot of stuff out there where you'll find mourning clothes that are just outrageous in terms of the coverage. And it really, I mean, there are images of women like completely covered, like, and but you
Right.
could barely see them. And that, if it did exist, was very rare. I mean, they were covered and they wore veils and everything like that. And we all know that, a lot of that was problematic, because a lot of the dyes that were covering,
Mm-hmm.
that were, wound up to be toxic,
Their
and
arsenic
being
was
that covered.
one of the main ingredients in black dye at that time.
Yeah.
That's scary when you start thinking about that, because they're inhaling it, and it's being absorbed through their skin, and you're wearing all of these clothes, and you could be during the summer months, so that your pores are open, so that contributes to so
Yeah.
much death
And
all
even more
along the.
detrimental was green,
Yes, oh my
you know,
God, yes.
because of arsenic,
Well,
and
the Victorian age, everything was green. All the wallpapers and
yeah,
everything. That to me always shocked me. It
yeah.
shocked me. But again, we're talking about a
Well,
time
that's
where,
because green, like in the book, it mentions that
yeah,
it was a new green. You know what I mean? And it wasn't. Did you see Frankenstein? The new
yes,
Frankenstein?
absolutely, yes,
And he had a lot of, she was wearing green in a lot
yeah.
of her things, which I thought was, well, Del Toro's, he's got his finger on the pulse. He's not going to, you know what I mean? So,
I
uh,
enjoy. You know what? I enjoy that movie. Just as a side note, I
mm,
enjoyed that movie immensely, and I thought that the costuming
yeah,
was really right on. That is something that, as someone who has, who dresses in the Victorian age for some of the talks I do,
mhm,
I am very. I'm not a stitch counter, but I am very, aware of the different. And it was something. If anybody ever gets a chance to watch it, if you haven't seen it, please do, and take the time and really look at the clothing. And if you really want to see some really interesting uh, takes on the clothing and the way it's worn, the way it shuffles, the way it the way it moves with the person. Watch the movie.
Yeah.
Tonight's guest is Paul Gambino. Excellent book, Beyond the Veil. Please buy this book. I'm not saying it because Paul and I are like, brothers. We're brothers in arms when it comes to this. I'm telling you to buy this book because it is well done, and it's beautiful. It's just a beautiful book. It's just so well put together. Now, let me ask you about when we start talking about the Victorian time period and we start talking about death. There was so many things that were going on at that time, right? There was like epidemics, and there were wars going on, and you had children labor. I mean, all of this kind of builds into the perfect storm of death. Was it as widespread as we often read about it? Where it's like, where I read, one of the quotes I read was, death touched every family, regardless if they were highborn or lowborn. Would that be something that would be like really correct?
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think there may be some exaggerations, like, because you'll read about all right, I'll answer it in two parts. For the first part, obviously, not obviously, I hate when death had to have touched every family. Well, look at this. They called the White House the Black House during that period.
Right.
Because so many people, it was mostly the children, and there was some, a lot of couple assassination attempts went bad because they could have lived, but because of sepsis setting in and stuff.
Garfield,
so, yeah.
Garfield is the prime example.
Garfield, so so I don't think no one was immune from it. No one's immune from it now. Usually what separates people of certain social stratas or economic stratas from, unfortunately, from living longer or better is better healthcare. Unfortunately, the healthcare wasn't much better across the the class system. So yes, it did affect everyone. Drinking water, maybe maybe you avoided cholera, if you weren't drinking out of the well that was in, but there's plenty of aristocracy and here in the States, people coming down with cholera. So no, it's a long-winded or roundabout answer to your question. It may have been exaggerated in certain sense, but no, it was definitely a part of everyone's life. So yes, it was a big part. It was a big part, more so for others, because some others had other issues to deal with. I mean, if you had to go to work, working conditions were so bad. So there, now you added that element of death into your life. So if your sleeping quarters, if you were living in the in the really, really bad tenements, had dysentery and all that stuff. Okay, so the upper class hopefully didn't have that. Weren't exposed to that. But in general, you did have to fear it a lot more. I mean, just the fact that there being no antibiotics, that's going to put everybody at risk.
Well, we
and the lack of people believing that.
Oh God,
the medical community.
Look at the time period. Pregnant mothers had a high rate of death because of the fact that there was a lack of germ theory, and so many doctors did not wash their hands. And I just mentioned Garfield. He was probed. Now, again, germ theory was known, but it was very slow.
Some doctors didn't want to believe it.
Yeah, and that was one of the doctors that worked on Garfield.
Yeah,
he probed with his finger or dirty instruments, and that's an otherwise
multiple times.
Yeah, a wound that he would have survived with. Same thing with McKinley. I mean, it's the exact same problem. And we start looking at that, and we start looking at where they weren't quite sure where these things might this bacteria may have been born out of, and you start seeing typhus and you start seeing cholera in certain areas. And finally, a doctor will turn around and say, well, this area here is like amazingly, nobody's getting sick, but over here, everybody's sick and dying. Yeah. And once you got cholera, once you got typhus, there was no antibiotics to cure you. You were just kind of like left in bed and hope for the best.
Yeah.
And that is what's amazing. And a lot of people in this day and age don't equate that, And now let me switch gears a little bit. Embalming. What influence did embalming have? Because I know in the American Civil War it was huge. But embalming, what influence did it have on the Victorian age?
Well, you're a Civil War guy, so you know that was really the turning point, because so many people were dying on the field. They had to get them back home. So the advancements in embalming really hold a lot, have to give a lot of credit to what was happening on the field during the Civil War. How it directly affected embalming was it kind of what the funeral practice came into existence. That was one of the reasons why it was. So, eventually, the family didn't take care of all those responsibilities. And then it became broken up to where there was to be a funeral director, an undertaker, an embalmer. Some of the skill set might have crossed over, but when it was seen that you could theoretically, or not theoretically, you could actually embalm someone and preserve them without having them be, on ice as the only preservative. There's an interesting thing on that about the ice thing. If I just
please,
a second,
please.
I didn't know when it came about later on during the research is those amazing coffins that you'll see that have the glass by their face.
Yes.
Many people thought that, the main reason was so that you can see the deceased through the thing. And that was partially true, but there was a practical end to it. And that was because as long as you kept it closed, the ice stayed ice longer.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that, you could still see the body. But embalming, chicken and the egg, did embalming help develop the funeral practice? I'm sure it did. Or did, the funeral practice leaving the home benefit from embalming? And it goes both ways. And best of my knowledge, the embalming was done pretty well. I mean, Lincoln, he lasted, I don't know if it was months, but it was definitely weeks and weeks and weeks on that train before he started to.
Well, did you ever hear the story about Lincoln in embalming? When they had those nefarious people came to steal, and they were going to ransom Lincoln's body. So they broke it in, and they were getting in there. Well, Robert Lincoln says, we're not going to go, and we're not going to ever have this again. So we're going to do safeguards. But they wanted to make sure that it was Lincoln that was still in that coffin.
Oh, wow.
So they opened the coffin. They kind of cut it. And I read a transcript of a kid at the time, he was a kid, looking in and seeing Lincoln's face. And they said that Lincoln's face was almost exact as he was in life. And the only thing was his face was like the skin, they said, was broken up. And what they figured out was it wasn't just the skin. He had been embalmed so many times along that trip that it was almost like he was tanned. And the cracking in the face, that was makeup that they had used. But they said his hair was still in one place, and his beard was still attached and still lifelike. And when they sealed it, they soldered it back up, and then they put it into the sarcophagus, and then they poured concrete over the top of it so they'd never be able to get to him again. So I think that's just like an amazing thing. And Jason's got another one, and these are one of my favorite. This is one of my favorite things to collect. What is the history behind hair wreaths?
Yeah.
Memento mori.
Yeah, I mean that developed because I think it developed mostly because hair wreaths even happened before came into existence before as a memento mori. They would use them,
Right.
and then I think it became more elaborate. First, there'd be hair clippings and jewelry, and so it just kept growing and growing and growing. To the point of that the hair wreath became the epitome of that type of memento mori. If I remember correctly, I think if they had their preference, there was a hair color that lasted much, kept its suppleness or whatever
Right.
longer, and it's mentioned in the book. But yeah, it was an outgrowth of just when moms would clip their baby's hair, and
Hmm.
and the child was still alive, and then then you would make a piece of jewelry out of it, then it's expanded. If that gentleman or that woman who was mentioned that you're aware of that, the big hair wreath, I mean the big hair memorial that she just died, and that whole thing went up for auction right now.
Yeah.
I think there was I forget how many pieces were there, but they still go that they pop up a lot, and they go for decent money, and
I've
sometimes you
got
got
a
to be
couple.
careful. You do, yeah.
Yeah, I've got a couple, and then I've got some smaller ones that I got out of France. Just the small ovals.
Yeah.
And the one that I have that I absolutely love, it's not in the best of shape. It's kind of faded, but there are tags, small tags written on with people's names on it on every little like flower arrangement
That's
in there.
nice.
So it's like a whole family that
Yeah.
somebody had collected. So you never know when you find these things. Let me ask you now. Let me ask you this. I have a thought. You know what? I'm just going to tell you, Paul. I'm never going to be able to go and ask you everything I want to talk to you
Oh, no,
about.
no, it's fine. You can go along. It's whatever you want.
Well, I have to. We have a time
I know.
constraint because of uploads. But let's talk about the development of these park-like settings for cemeteries. Why did that develop? Because you see that back in the day, people would go out and they'd go to the cemetery and they would enjoy picnics and they would enjoy these concerts and stuff. What kind of like pushed it to that limit to where during the Victorian age where people wanted to go and enjoy being with
Yeah.
their relatives?
Well, apparently the first one was actually in the States.
Hmm.
Before it even, the park, like the park, but that one, no one really talks about it. I believe there at the time, right before the park like ones, I think they were called like I think there was 13 of them, and they had a name, and they were right in London,
Right.
and
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, but due to the heavy mortality rate, the high mortality rate and all that kind of stuff, it was, thought of that we can have a new experience, and that would be to the um, take the cemetery out of the city. And if you could take it out of the city, there was a lot more land, and France, I believe, had built one already that had the park-like feel. And when it became that you had to leave London and take a train, and there was, the specific train for
Hmm.
a while till the Blitzkrieg that took you there, you made the trip. It was beautiful it was beautifully landscaped. It was a final resting place. It naturally evolved that, it could be a place for um, I don't want to say enjoyment, but a place to reflect and to, uh, do more than mourn. And that
Hmm.
also, again, was the outgrowth of the psychology of the Victorians' outlook towards death. It was inevitable. It was going to happen. There were so many of us. Let's, um,
Yeah.
and I was interviewed by the funeral museum, and they were very upset that how now in the 20th and 21st century how we compress all mourning. You know what I
Yes.
mean?
Oh,
Funerals take a
yeah.
day. You know what I mean?
Right.
So the park like settings and that just another outgrowth or another not outgrowth another way that psychologically the Victorians dealt with it and felt that it's an experience. It's not just for mourning, um, and and you know and
Now,
it became a big deal. I mean, there were
oh
famous
gosh, yeah.
architects,
Well, you look at
assigned.
Highgate. Highgate
Yeah, Highgate. Yeah,
is an amazing memorial park. It
yeah,
is just it's insane. And here in the Buffalo, New York area, we have our Forest Lawn, which is based on that same principle, the rolling hills
yeah.
and the ponds and the statuary, and it's the architects come in to design these beautiful memorials. And you when you walk through there, it's a sense of living, and it's also a sense of memory. And I think
Hmm.
that's what a lot of that was, and I think a lot of it is so important. So we have now we're gonna have to end this on one of my favorite notes now, Paul. We're gonna talk about spiritualism. We talked off air
Right.
about my pedigree with it. In your opinion, why do you think it spread so insanely from a little tiny rented cottage in the middle of nowhere along the Erie Canal, basically, to a worldwide phenomena?
I think well, we always have to come back to the thing that death was such a death was um such a part of people's lives, and not wanting to so easily. I know that I'm saying that they accepted it as part of life, but
Hmm.
they also accepted it that maybe there's the possibility, since so many people are dying, that maybe we can continue to contact to have this contact with them. I do also believe that you know um, you know the Fox sisters having such popularity at such a you know barnstorming breakneck speed,
Yes.
um
Yes.
that obviously just and then unfortunately, well, fortunately, in one sense, I think one thing that was good, and a lot of people say you know it was driven a lot by women, and it
Hmm.
gave women a lot of power that they really didn't have anywhere else in society.
Yes.
So that was
Exactly.
good, and I think there was some element of that kind of like became very attractive to other women, and also became attractive to the media at the time. And um, then it became, I think, unfortunately, uh,
Hmm.
people realized a lot of unscrupulous medium, that there was money to be made. There was money to be made as a spiritualist, and there was money
Yes.
to be made to cover these events, and to cover these. There was money to be made on the one-on-one or within your own home, or have people come to you, and then it grew. There was money to be made for if they wanted to expand their audience, and then there was money to be made by people to have you know the PT Barnums of that
Yep.
genre to
Exactly.
expand it. So, um,
Exactly.
you know, and then and then it grew out, like you're saying, because then it was people like Mumler, and then you had spiritual photography, so that just made it help you justify it, and it kept growing and growing and growing. Um, so many elements. It's almost like it the closest thing now, I guess, would be the healing churches. It's you want to, you know what I mean, and they
Yes.
have a fanatical following,
Yes.
and
Oh, yes. The
y-
laying of hands, and
yes,
you see a lot of that in the post I always say there's two great ages of spiritualism. The golden age, where my relatives caught on to it, and then the golden age of fraud.
Yeah.
And that, that was a shame, but it was something that was driven. You're right. It was driven by women, because places like Lilydale, the Lilydale Assembly here in Western New York, it was a place where women could go and they could speak, and they could go in front of in front of an assembly. And being a medium was an outlet, something that they didn't, they didn't have to go and always be washerwomen and servants and men clothes and that. So it was really something that it was kind of earth shaking, but it just gets, you're right, 100%. What happens is it gets to be almost like P.T. Barnum-ish. And I think that's where the whole religion did get a black eye. So, I mean, we have to, you always have to go and you have to weigh everything with this. Now, final question, my friend. And this is right up, and it's a hard question. Are you ready for this one, Paul? This is a question that I've had like people just like freeze because they can't think of it. So we're going to take a breath, and I'm going to, here's the question. At the end of it all, Paul, at the end of it all, you're gone, you're planted, they're set in the stone. What's your epitaph going to read on your stone? That's a hard question, but what is it? What do you think it'll be?
Sorry.
I love it. And it was so quick. That was great.
I think that's because I think, I don't think I've, that's probably what it
mine is. Mine is, he was an okay guy.
That's good.
Good enough.
Yeah.
Paul, I got to ask you, where can you get your book, and where can you buy all of your books?
They're all on Amazon.
That's where I bought mine. That's where I bought my copy. And I just want to let everybody know that this book, let me just open it up. It's beautiful. Look at this. It's absolutely beautiful, guys. I mean, it's full color, beautiful photography, from collections. It is so well written. It flows. It's something that if you are even closely interested in the age, buy this book, because I've read so many Victorian, about Victorian mourning that was just they were so dry. They were sometimes too highbrow. This book is fantastic. If you were to go and say to somebody, what would you, if you lived back then, what would you want to be remembered by? Let's say during that Victorian age, how would you want to be remembered as a person, so that people in our age, like you and I, see these photos, see this stuff, and say, wow, I wish I knew who this person was, and what would you want to be remembered like by? It's another hard question, but
right. But in hindsight, I have hindsight now, right? That I can go back, and it would definitely be to help children, because that would be a disaster. I mean, if you were in a position to, to save
the orphanage,
or have children have somewhat of a life other than what they had. I mean, that's
the orphanage system and the workhouse system. I mean, if anybody has ever read, what is it, Bleak House? That is like probably one of the most eye-opening books that I've ever read.
Really, I have to see about that.
Yeah, it's just an old classic, And if you start thinking about that, and it's a lot about the workhouses and kids, and you're like, oh my God, it's like, it's a wonder that any of them ever survived. And most of them, if they did survive, they're usually maimed. Their hands were, from the mills and stuff. It's always just something that is great. Paul, stick around. I want to thank you properly after here. This was great, and I just want to let you know, Paul. I am just like so ecstatic to have been able to speak with you, and I am so honored that you took the time out of your busy schedule to be a part of my show. And
I wanted to. It's not. I didn't take any time. I wanted to do this. This was something I look forward to.
This was great, and again, everybody, seriously, you guys know that I endorse some books. I endorse some things. There are a lot of them that I will just kind of gloss over. this book is one for your library. If you're interested in this subject at all, even a small bit, please buy this book. It is that good. So
I can't thank you enough.
I'll be back in a couple seconds, my friend. Thank you again.
All right, thank you.
Paul Gambino, an amazing, amazing author. He's a collector of oddities. I love being able to go and pick the mind of someone who has really gone and deep dove into the topic. And that's why I think this has been just so important to do. And I love being the fact that I'm able to go and share this man's knowledge with all of you. And you guys all know how I am when it comes to the Victorian age and Civil War and that all thing. Paranormal is great. Don't get me wrong. Paranormal is great, but sometimes you have to be able to go and tie different ages into where you are and understand the time period, the setting, the scene, what's going on there. That's what a true investigator becomes. You become a detective, and that's what I love. Guys, we'll be back next Tuesday. Be good, take care, do good things. Be kind. Ciao, babies. You've been listening to the Black Cat Lounge, where the elite meet. Where else? Next to the dumpster transfer station. What can I tell you? Take care, my friends. All the best. Love you all. Bye-bye.